Hey, what's going on, you guys? It's your boy Brad Gebhardt here from Verb Moto. First and foremost, thanks for tuning in. This is another installment of what we're calling a Moto album here on Verb Moto. This whole project is really interesting to me because what it allows us to do is sort of dive into the history of the sport and sort of shed some light on some characters and individuals who have shaped the sport to become what it is today. And what we're hoping to do is kind of show some visual aids through showing these guys some pictures and kind of pulling out those stories that maybe you haven't heard before. Maybe you didn't understand how things became what they are, or what's the background story on certain athletes that there isn't a lot of information about them in some old magazines or something like that. Or maybe you don't have those old magazines and you're really interested in finding out some of those things. This is exactly what that's for. And what I love about this particular program is that there's any number of racers who might not have a very good memory for their career, but when shown photos, they are able to sort of like kind of theater of the mind a little bit and sort of remember, oh yeah, that gear, or that company totally screwed me over, or that bike was horrible, by the way. Um, what these photos allow us to do is sort of just pick apart the history of the sport and sort of take these little bite-sized installments of sort of taking shape into what the sport truly is. It's something amazing, and it's something that's taken decades to sort of tell its story. And so what we're hoping to do here is tell that story, shed some light on some really cool individuals, and ultimately just celebrate dirt bikes because they're awesome. Anyway, guys, thanks for tuning in to another Moto album. Let's get into the show. Welcome to a Verb Moto album with your host, Brad Gebhardt. With me on the line today, an absolute motocross legend. He's been around for a long time. He's seen a lot of things. We're going to show him some pictures and see what he remembers. I got to think he's going to remember quite a bit. Goes by the name of Dr. D. I'm talking about Doug Dubach. Welcome to Moto Album.
Thanks, Brad. It's an honor to be here, and I never shy away from telling old race stories. So yeah, it's an honor.
Absolutely. This program, this show idea is purpose built for a guy like yourself he's got a bit of a photographic memory to begin with, but I always thought it would be a neat idea to be able to sort of flip through a photo album with your favorite racer or a legend like yourself and just pull out some of those old stories and just kind of talk about the gear or whatever particular year it was. And you're a perfect candidate for that. So thanks for making time for this.
Yep. Yeah, no worries. I'm looking forward to it.
Love it. Before we get to some pictures, what's Doug Dubach doing these days? What have you been busy with? I see not too long ago you're over in Europe with Team Guam, and yeah, you've actually been making a bit of a habit of that lately, going over there for some vet destinations and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, I guess these days, I guess we would talk about, recent, this last 2.5 months I have spent in various countries in Europe, and it all kind of started out in France, riding a race that I've done many times. It's a kind of a celebration of a guy, Moreau, who, if you ever watch any of
Brian
the old
Moreau,
Paris, yeah. So, he was always the guy that supplied the Hondas to all the Honda guys. And so he died of cancer, and his wife puts on this memorial race each year, and a handful of us go, and, and guys from all over, older European guys will show up, and it's always a good time. So, the kind of icing on the cake for that event is I get to ride a YZM 500, which is something that I missed out on in its heyday. It's kind of funny. I'm already going to wander off and down some random road, but
that's what we're
I
here
had the
for, man.
opportunity in 1988, just through a common friend, well, Jim Castillo. I think we had talked before the show a little bit about Jim. He's a good friend of mine, and he knew Jackie Vermont very well.
Okay.
So I was at a international race in France that I just got invited to, and I knew Jackie barely, and so it's just Jim went. And that day, Jackie's mechanic, a guy named Michelle, says, "Hey, do you want to ride this thing?" Because, I was like staring at it like, ooh, ah. And I'm like, it's okay. I'll ride it, because I was already, knee deep in Yamaha testing, so I was already traveling to Japan and just, figure I'll ride it. I don't want to look like some anxious guy that's going to, jump on your bike and loop it out in the grass field. So, passed that over, and then we never got it because it was a factory bike.
Yeah.
it was never really, it didn't spend much time in Japan, and that whole program was so short lived that
Hmm.
that bike just came and went. So yeah, it was just a missed opportunity. And so God, it must have been 8 or 9 years ago was the first time I went to Marianne's race in France and got to ride that thing. And yeah, it was funny. My then, I don't know, 11, 12-year-old kid, I told him, I said, I'm going to start this for you. You get on it and you ride it down there and back. And he's like, no, no. He was really afraid. And I said, just do it. And so he got on it. He rode it up and back. And I took a video and I said, you're probably one of 10 people that's ever ridden one of these in the
Holy.
world. So it was a funny little video I made of him doing that. But so yeah, it was some, what would that have been? Almost 40 years later, I finally got to ride one.
No kidding, man. And your son actually made his pro debut this last year, did he not? He actually raced some outdoor nationals.
Yeah, he affectionately we call him the part timer because he's
Okay.
kind of got his hands in everything. He's a full time college student. He's instrument rated, commercial rated pilot, and
Amazing.
so
That's a
he's
great
just
occupation.
yeah, he's without getting down a whole nother road going the other way. He's actually currently in India delivering an airplane. So not a lot of people ferry planes that far, especially a single engine Cessna from California to India. But his friend ferries planes, and he did almost this exact same trip about 2 months ago, or right after the Colorado National. He went and did one, and then now they've just are almost finished doing another one. So
Wow.
yeah,
That
he's
is really
he's
neat.
he juggles a lot of different items in his life.
Fair enough. Yeah, it's a little bit more industrious than your average motocross privateer, but yeah, that's pretty
Exactly.
cool. Yeah, and like hey, like as far as the attracting women side of things, like I'm a pilot, I race professional motocross, like I like that's
Yeah, every
a
meme you see, it's something about a pilot bragging that he's a pilot. So yeah,
yeah,
it's
yeah,
funny
yeah.
you
Like
say that.
there you go. How do you know you're at a party with a pilot? He tells you.
Exactly. Exactly. So, but anyway, so kind of back to him having his motocross debut,
Yeah,
he just came to me. And he's just always a part-time racer. We did it all. We went to Mammoth, we went to
yeah.
Loretta's, we did all the junk, not consistently year after year, but just whatever. I never pushed bikes on him. He likes them, but he knew it was never going to be like his thing.
Mhm.
And so he comes to me, I don't know, probably about February or March. He's like, Dad, I think I'm going to be pretty consumed almost every summer after this summer. So I'd like to ride an AMA National. And I'm like, okay. So that's kind of what started it. Got some bikes together and off we went. I told him he did better than me. I didn't even qualify my first national.
There you
I
go.
crashed out at Hangtown and was stuck in one of those lovely orange fences. And I
Amazing.
watched the LCQ from still being stuck in the mud under one of those orange fences. So at least he qualified his first time out.
No kidding. Your first national, 1982, Carlsbad. I guess that's in your backyard, man.
Yeah. Well, see, I went to Hangtown
Mhm.
and
I guess that's the
didn't
first time you
qualify.
scored points. So
Well, no, I
the
didn't qualify at Hangtown. And then I
right.
went, Carlsbad's got a whole nother funny story. So I took my buddy
Yeah.
who, he was a bit thirsty early in the day. And so by the time the racing came around, he was asleep in my truck. So I'm out there racing. That's when it was 45 minutes. I'm out there racing around and I'm thinking I'm doing it, whatever. I'm just like, yeah, I'm just jazzed to be doing it. And white flag lap, I hear a bike and I look back, it's Jeff Ward. And I'm like, oh, I got to get out of this guy's way. He must be leading. And then I walk over, 15 minutes later and look at the scoreboard and, he finished right in front of me. Because what did I get? A ninth or a 10th? What does it
Let's
say in
check
the
the
moto?
motos. It doesn't show moto scores. It shows you in that particular race. It says you 22nd overall, but you must have had
Yeah. So I
a
went,
second moto wasn't that good.
I think I went 10 DNF.
Okay.
So yeah,
Yeah,
so
that makes
Wardy got
sense.
ninth the first moto and I got 10th the first moto. So that was
Yeah, because
never
Wardy was
again. That was my
14th.
lesson. What's that?
Yeah. Wardy was 14th, so that would make sense if he was right in front of you and then huh.
Maybe he was, yeah, maybe had another bad moto, second moto. But so that was my introduction to riding with no information on a pit board.
There you
Never let
go.
anybody buy. That's the takeaway. Don't ever let anyone buy,
In a national
especially on the
won
last
by
lap.
Mark Barnett, Jim Gibson, and George Holland was your podium on that particular day at
Yeah.
1982, ladies and gentlemen.
Yep. Yep.
I
Some
love it. So
fast dudes there.
heck yeah. No, honestly, like maybe it's just because, and I think we'll talk about this a little bit as well. And one of the things that I love about the older eras is that in today's day and age, there are like in any one particular weekend, there's 100 photos and maybe an hour's worth of like collectively hours worth of video of like say Jett Lawrence or Eli Tomac or everything, anyone quite like that. Um, but all of it's so disposable. None of it holds the same amount of like because back in the day, like there was only one or two magazines every single weekend or every single month.
Hmm.
So over the course of a year, if you had two really good magazines over the course of a year, you'd have 24 magazines full of photos to look at. That
Yep.
is like that's probably uploaded about motocross. It's probably uploaded every hour on moto
That
seriously.
same amount of content. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And it's just it becomes like because there's so much of it, it's so abundant, we don't hold on to it the way we used to.
No, I
And
agree. I agree. I mean, you probably did the same. I don't know how old you are, but I could I could tell you every word in every, pick whatever publication it was,
oh yeah,
Motocross Action or Dirt Bike, or then some others came along, and I mean, Cycle News. We used to rush down to the local newspaper.
I
Oh,
still have
there
my
you go.
Roost magazine from 1999 July issue. That like,
Nice.
and I've gone through that a hundred times. And I like honestly, I look at the probably more than 100 times. Honestly, I look at the results page from this week from this particular race. Like just going down. This is just the 125 class. Keeping in mind there was two other classes that were racing that particular day. Mark Barnett, Jim Gibson, uh, like Johnny O'Mara, George Holland. That's three champions right in the same in Ron Turner, Gary Bowman. Like you had a different Mike Brown. You have Jeff Ward. Like this is yourself. Like this is like a murderer's row on 125s, and like it's not only the fact that it was stock full of talent, but because there was only so much content that could be put out there like it made heroes of these people. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like
Um,
like you're
Absolutely.
like
Friends of mine somehow
yeah,
find
Brian
old.
Myerscough.
Yeah, Brian Myerscough, another. I mean, that guy, if he didn't get sick, that guy would have been a many, many time champ. But
There you go.
so I don't know. Some friends of mine will find these old results from Cycle News or somewhere. I don't know. Maybe they float around Facebook. I'm really not much of a Facebook guy, but
Yeah,
and yeah, just like you say, the lift, it's just insane all the way down. You're looking at guys that eventually became national champs that were 12th in a local intermediate race, which, obviously it all happens in that order. But,
yeah,
it's just, you go, wow, because the SoCal scene, which I know was a big, kind of boiling pot of talent, it was insane. And yeah, I remember a story like in the old Golden States. If people remember that, you got to be pretty old to remember Golden State, but you
right.
had to ride qualifiers just to get into the 40-man gate.
Yeah,
And it was serious. It'd be 90 125 pros at a Golden State show up at Saddleback or Huron or Lake Madeira, Hangtown, whatever. And it was absolutely gnarly.
yeah. No, that and that honestly, and that what the result of that is that if you were able to be successful at those races, you were the cream of the crop. Like when
Yes.
90 guys who consider themselves a pro show up and you're at the top of that heap, like you're an absolute world beater. And then
Yeah.
when you take on the rest of the world, it shows. So
Yeah.
we're gonna go through some photos. Like I said off air, we could probably do 50 of these. And
Yeah.
honestly, you're like, yeah, we could do one just on test bikes you've worked on. We could just do one just on Yamahas that you've worked on. We like I could go on for days. But let's crack this thing wide open. I'm gonna share my screen here and we'll open things up. Uh, you got me?
Well, yeah, there's a good looking fella right there.
Dude,
Love that hat. That hat is sweet. Now I just see the next one must be at night
Yeah. One sec here.
because
What's
I
going
only
on here?
see just blackness. Oh, now you're
Oh,
back.
now I'm back. Why is that doing that? That is super weird. That should just work. It worked before.
Should. That's the key word in there in that sentence, right?
Technical difficulties here
There you
on
go. Need a little elevator
um
music playing right now
yeah,
while
no
they need
kidding.
reboots or buffers or whatever.
No, no. Let's see. Uh Wait one sec here. Okay, we'll do it. Maybe we'll do it this way. Can you see it now?
Hold on, a little buffering. Yep. There it is.
Okay, perfect. We'll leave it like that, and people can kind
Okay.
of see where we're going with this. So, like, at first you'd think that, like, wow, that's a good looking guy in in a wee big camel smoker cross hat, but it's not. That's a young Doug
That's
Dubach
that's the
with
real deal there. That's a camel supercross.
that's a camel
I
supercross
should have hung
hat.
on to that hat.
You should have, honestly. Yeah, that thing be. I actually I have some Camel Supercross banners, like the
Oh,
original.
nice.
Yeah, and I'm yet to put them in my man cave, but like everything's on point. Like a toothy grin. You've got the hockey hair. I like that. That's a great.
Yeah, still
That's a
to
great
this
hit.
day, I deny that I ever had a mullet, but stuff like this surfaces, and then
Yeah.
it's hard to fight that fight.
Yeah, like this is damning evidence that you in fact did have a mullet of sorts. That's more like I feel like that's more just a shag and or like kind of just
Yeah. See,
yeah.
and that's the story I'm sticking with. So yeah,
All
let's
right.
go with that.
All right, perfect. And then like I do love the O'Neill iron on top of O'Neill gear. I guess they wanted to let everyone know that they were a sponsor of yours on top of the fact that you're wearing the jersey. That
Yeah,
jersey looks
well,
to be pretty heavy. But yeah,
yeah, it was
good looking cat
100%
here.
cotton.
Yep.
I'm sure you remember seeing the photos of all of our, arts and crafts where we would get the sharp scissors out and
Oh
cut
yeah.
holes in them because it
I
was
had
like
cotton
wearing a
jerseys.
sweater. Yeah, you'd be at Southwick in the summertime, and it's like putting on a sweater to go out for your moto.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a bit rough. And then Jim Castillo, love him to death. Jim Castillo, Jim O'Neill, love him to death. But yeah, he would always, I remember the conversation. Doesn't your wife have good laundry soap? Because I'd ask for more jerseys, and you take you go to Redbud,
Yeah.
you ride in 1,000 degrees, you're sweating like crazy, you get roosted. Even if you let every lap, you're going to get roosted by lappers and all that. That red clay,
100%.
Axton, Virginia, all those red clay races. Stuff it in your bag, overnight, fly home, all that. Don't wash it for 24 hours. I don't care how good your laundry detergent is. You're not getting that thing white again.
No.
And so he would always, I'm like, Jim, you come home from riding and hand it right to your wife. I live in a little bit different environment than your local track that's 20 minutes down the street.
No kidding. Yeah, no, that would be over the top. And then now if you think about it, when they show like when Kenny Day from Fox shows up to a race, he's got usually it's four sets of pants and no, three sets of pants and two jerseys or four jerseys for any one rider. So they usually have one extra jersey than they have pants, and they're all done up. It's all one-off stuff. And yeah, they do collect a lot of that stuff because a lot of it gets like if Kenny gives away anything, it's to like Road to Recovery and stuff like that.
Yep.
But yeah, nowadays, like I think they put out in a magazine one year of the amounts of everything the guys got, and James Stewart went through over 200 pairs of goggles
Oh yeah,
in a
that
year.
doesn't surprise me. Yeah.
You're probably you're going to the line this year and just like knocking the dust out of your goggles, maybe a few tear offs attached to that. What
Uh,
year is this, by the way?
so that
Oh, Bevo would
is
have had you set.
no, yeah, that's what I was just going to chime in. Bevo always hooked me up, so I was always good for goggles.
All right.
Uh, just looking at that jersey and that hat, I'd say that's around 1990. That's yeah. I would say 1990. I was probably number 7 that year.
Good look.
Yeah, yeah, that's not bad. And I think, and here goes, I can't even remember what I had for lunch, but I will tell you that year we went over to Catalina Island to have
Okay.
the, Supercross, Camel Supercross party.
Mhm.
And yeah, about half of us were ready to vomit our brains out because the boat ride over was so choppy and rough.
Oh
And those that
my.
didn't get sick on the boat ride ended up getting tendonitis from playing volleyball for 4 hours. So
Fair enough.
yeah, good times, good times.
Was Jim Hawley on that particular trip?
So if he was, we probably wouldn't have seen him because he tends to find his way astray.
Okay.
We'll just
Yeah.
say, so yeah, he probably was around. Because I don't know, that might have been a little late for Jimmy. I think maybe 88, 89. So if it was 90 or 91, he's probably at home chasing somebody around.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough. Okay, so this
And
is go ahead.
you brought it up, and I've told the story quite a few times, but on the Jim Hawley vein, my very first Supercross podium was 88 LA Coliseum, and got third. Super stoked. Brock's last win. Lachine was second. And so I'm, happy as could be. And I mean, I wasn't on the, how long does a podium thing take? 10 extra minutes.
15 minutes
By the time
tops.
I get, by the time I get back to my van, my van's locked. And so I'm asking my mechanic, hey, do you have the keys? He goes, no, I think the keys are inside. I don't know. So long story short, Jimmy managed to lift up the chain link fence, the temporary chain link fence, and he was occupying my van when I got back from the podium because apparently he wanted to keep it a secret from his father because Al would
Okay.
have kicked his ass.
All right, fair enough. Well, so
So
him and a lovely
a
young lady.
spectator, let's just say a
Okay,
spectator,
okay, yeah, fair enough. We're yeah, like exchanging,
occupying my van.
occupying,
Probably race
occupying.
stories. I'm sure she had something to do with racing. So I'm sure they were just talking.
Perhaps a potential sponsor.
There you go. There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah, he's thinking that lifelong O'Neill deal in there. That's what he was doing.
There you
Um
go.
okay, so let's go straight into where I know you from. And one of these photos is not Canadian. I think the other one is. But first of all, near and dear to my heart, White Brothers. Like they're a sponsor of the podcast on Big MX Radio.
Mm-hmm.
John Anderson. Like veering off on my own here, I actually got an opportunity to go through the early years of motocross museum with Tom White about a year before he passed, unfortunately. Love that guy.
Nice. Nice.
Um,
Yeah, he was one of a kind, Tom was.
he seriously was, Doug. Like I'm just Brad from Canada. I'm a kid with a dream about doing this and doing it full time, and I've been able to do that. But this was 2017. Like I barely gotten onto the scene, and he put a mountain bike ride on hold to go through that thing with me. Like he walked me through every single one of those bikes for 2.5 hours, and it like
And they all had a
it
story.
they all
Yeah.
did, and
They
yeah,
all had a story, where they came from, what he did with them, and
right.
who the guy was and how it came about. Yeah, I loved it. I would hang out in there for just as long as he'd let me. It was, yeah. So actually that photo on the left, me number one, Tom is barely out of frame there. He is interviewing
Okay,
me. Yeah. That was one of the
is that four stroke
four stroke
nationals?
nationals. That was a
Okay.
4 stroke national at Glen Helen. And yeah, Tom is just out of sight there. A blow up poster that O'Neill had in their showroom forever got handed down. And my mom had that picture in her house for a very long time. And yes, of course, the Canadian 118. How could you miss that? Is that Dubach behind me? I can't
I
tell.
think that's actually Canadian national or American national.
Yeah.
That's 115, and that's Robbie Raynard behind you.
Oh, that's Raynard 17.
Yeah,
Oh, so that is 115. Okay, so I was 118 in
in
Canada.
Canada. Yeah,
I
I
was
had a hard
trying to
time
get
finding.
115.
Yeah, I had a hard time getting a Canadian photo, but this will have to do. Tell me a little
Yeah.
bit about this year, a little bit about this bike.
So that I believe that was the 426.
It was.
um, so that was actually the last year I ever rode a national. I went, I decided that, whatever, life's changing, I had kids and just the way life progresses. So I wanted to go and ride two nationals. I wanted to ride two of my favorite tracks, and I wanted to ride, the lights class or whatever, and then the big class. I wanted to ride, one event in each class. So I went to Washougal and rode a 250F in '01.
Which was won
And
by Larry Ward.
he won one moto. I don't know if he won the overall. I think
I think he at least,
Langston.
yeah.
Yeah, I think he won a moto, but I think
Okay.
it was either Langston, because I think Pastrana won one moto, and I think Larry Ward won the other moto, but
Okay.
might have been Langston or, gosh, yeah, I don't remember.
In
But
2000?
it was 2001, because I was on a 250F.
Yeah, that's right.
And so the backstory there is, I'm like, oh, I'm trying to get a bike, and I didn't have one. And so Spud Walters got one of his friends to loan me one. And so, I went up there and I just started DRD. So I went up there with our airbox we made and a slip on pipe and, the right jetting and whatnot. And yeah, I ended up going, I go like 712 for 10th overall. And that was my target, was to get inside the top 10.
That's not
And
bad
as
mixing
the
it up with the
story,
kids, man.
yeah, I was 38 at that time. So yeah, I was definitely nearly twice their age. But the best part of the day, Ross Maeda, who's done my suspension forever, and he was doing the Yamaha of Troy. So it was Ernesto and Ramsey. Well, first moto, I beat both of those guys. One of them, I might have been Ernesto. I caught him and passed him in like the last 2 or 3 laps to get that 7th. And so Ross grinded those guys for, I swear it was the next 6 months. Like, hey, you guys got a little while to go, but if you ever get old enough to ride a vet race, you might make the podium.
Oh
Because
my
indicating that
God,
I
he's
would still
killing
kick
them.
their
Yeah, he's
ass.
still kicked their ass. Jesus.
But that was a great day for me, obviously. Just, kind of not off the couch, because, I was still riding all the time. And so, but I hadn't ridden a national in a few years. So it was neat to just kind of show up and, put it together and get a top 10 finish. So then Millville, which is a couple weeks later,
Right.
again, I'd borrowed a bike from a local shop, just took suspension and a pipe, and wanted to get 10th overall again. And I got 11th overall. I was
11th
so
overall.
disappointed because I think I got like 10th the first moto, and I'm okay. And yeah, just get a little squeezed on the start and just couldn't get it done. I think, yeah. So I think it was 10, 12 or something for 11th overall.
That's
A
super
little
neat.
disappointed. But and then the takeaway from that day, Ricky Carmicheal lapped me in the exact same corner, the exact same lap, both motos. So between the two of us, we were pretty consistent.
Hey, consistency wins championships, and he certainly did that year.
There you go. He did, I didn't. But yeah, it was the turn before the finish, getting the white flag.
Yeah.
He lapped me first moto. I'm like, oh, okay, whatever. Second moto, I hear a bike coming. I come around that corner. I see the white flag, and Carmichael goes by me again. I'm like, wow, that's I should have put that down on a Foursquare and bet on it, because that would have never happened.
No kidding. Millville is actually one of the racetracks where, like, one of the things that I miss about the 2000s moto, and also the 90s, tracks where the finish line wasn't a jump.
Yeah.
Like, it wasn't a jump. Like, it was just basically, it was like essentially it was almost like a roller that was like right out of a corner, or sometimes it was just straight up a straightaway.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, so many tracks used to be, but I guess TV
yeah,
comes along, because Troy, Ohio was just out of a
Steel
corner.
City.
Steel City, yep, just around that corner. And even Hangtown, many different times, it wasn't a jump. It was just kind of, you went around a corner and there was the checkered flag. But yeah, it's I guess the evolution or something. I don't know. It got to have a jump for TV, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I always used to love when you'd see a guy, like, obviously it's a wide open straightaway, and he knows he's gonna win, so he's just like fist pumping the shit out of it when he's coming across the finish line. I always thought that was pretty cool. And
Yeah.
the finish line flagger would jump.
Yeah, yeah.
They would jump and they would like wave the flag in the air, and I thought that was hilarious. You see some old pictures where I think honestly the Brian Deegan the bike when he ghost
Launched the
rides the
bike.
bike, yeah,
Yeah.
he's jumping off and the flagger's doing so as well. What do you remember
Yeah.
about breaking the Canadians' hearts this particular year? Because I don't know that you lost more than a couple of motos all year long. Like,
So that was just the whole thing was, almost storybook because Dave Gallen, who I just ran into, I hadn't seen him in years.
okay,
I went to Silverstone MotoGP in the UK when
yeah,
I was over there just a few months back. And I'm sitting in the Yamaha, hospitality that's MotoGP, F1, those guys do, they got deep pockets because those places are like a little city inside. But
oh yeah,
and who comes walking in is Dave Gallen, and I'm like,
Gallen,
no way. But anyway, he calls me, hey, presents the whole thing to me, and I'm like, yep, no, Dave, I don't have time. Nope, nope. A week or so goes by, calls me again, hey, come on. Well, yeah, he had some other thing. Oh, Yamaha will double the contingency. He had some other offer, and I'm like, nah, Dave, I just no, no, no. And then I can't even remember what he offered me the third time, but I'm like, okay, just so you'll stop calling me, I'll come up there and race. And it was literally like 3 weeks before the first round. So it was, and then the whole thing rolled in my very first rental car. I walk out to the slot it's parked in, and it was in number 118. And I'm like, all right, I like that. That's a good sign.
yep, things are
So,
rolling.
and then I didn't win the first moto because my buddy Ryan Huffman
Okay,
decided that he was going to be, I don't know, more aggressive than I guess I was expecting. I passed him for the lead,
yeah,
and he just came back aggressive. I ended up going down. I think we barely touched, but it was just I passed him really clean. So I thought, okay, that's good. And I kind of went back to the racing line, and then, anyways, so yeah, I think I got maybe third or fourth because it was only on like the second or third lap. So I was 40th by the time I got up. But then after that, I went on quite a long little run. I think I won like 9 motos straight, which was, I mean, and it's not like I going away. I think after a few, I think I really got in their heads
oh
because,
yeah,
whoever it was, Dubay or, Blair Morgan
Lange,
or,
Morgan,
Darcy Lang or, just all these guys who just, oh, yes, guy's like almost 40 years old, and I was just tenacious. I mean, that's how I had success all through my career. And I was fit because I was a test rider that rode more laps than probably all of them put together
oh
each
for
week,
sure.
so I was, I maybe didn't lead, every lap, but I, I led the last lap a lot of times. And yeah, that was, it was just great, riding a new track. I'd never seen any of these tracks before. So that was a challenge for me, even though, after a while, everyone's just like, oh, you're cheating or whatever. It's just like, you
Of
shouldn't be
course,
up here kind of thing. Kind of like they treat you when you go to Loretta's. You're an old pro. You shouldn't be here. Kind of.
yeah,
That was almost how I felt. But everyone was super nice. I mean, I got
yeah.
along with everyone. I remember one, I think it was at Barry or something. Dubay led for the longest time. And I think he thought he was going to win. And I passed him like 2 laps to go and beat him. And he was crushed. And he came over, and I think he was having a little arm pump trouble, but we sat down. We had a nice little, man talk for probably 30, 40 minutes just on the
No
bumper of his
way.
truck.
Yeah,
And it's so funny. I didn't even realize Andy White was his mechanic at that time, FXR Andy.
that's right.
It's just, the things you learn later in life. I'm like, oh, that's right. Yeah, that's why you look familiar to me
That's
because
hilarious.
I
Yeah, you
see
guys were
Andy all the
kids,
time now.
right?
But it was just really cool. Josh Woods from Michigan was in there, and there's just a handful of guys. Treadwell came down and rode a handful. JSR showed up at 3 or 4 of them, just because he was riding the AMA stuff, and
Right. Was Hamlin
it was just a good
2001?
time. 2001, no,
Yeah.
2000. Sorry,
Hamlin also,
2000.
yeah. What do
Yeah,
you
and I
remember
never.
about? Go ahead.
I was just saying I never went back to defend because the whole Yamaha Dave Gallen thing kind of fell apart. But yeah, 2000s when I raced in Canada.
Huh. Was that the year like I can never remember which year it is that uh Sean Hamlin went up and raced on Blackfoot on a
Yes, it
125.
was the year he won
He won the
one of the
125
coasts
Wests. Yeah,
west. Okay, so he
yeah.
won, but
He
then he
beat
never
Lange.
rode the big bike. It was kind of weird. He might have
No,
rode one round and didn't do well, and so he never. Because those poor guys, I felt bad for like Darcy and Josh Woods and those guys. They'd be riding freaking 4 motos in a day.
yeah, they had to double class it.
Yeah, and then but it's so funny because they almost were not as good when it got to only the big bike.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think Darcy struggled. It's like he was so occupied and just race. He was almost warmed up better. I don't know. He seemed stronger when he was riding both classes. When he was just on the, the big bike only, he seemed to struggle. So I don't know. That
Yeah,
was kind of a weird. I expected those guys to be really tough in the second half when they didn't have to ride a 125 as well. But I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of interesting. But yeah, that's Hamlin won on that Blackfoot Honda. And then Jason Thomas, because when Blair uh, broke a bone in his hand
right.
in Calgary, they brought Jason Thomas up, and I thought, oh, here we go, because I knew he was good down in Florida, and I just would barely know his name, but yeah, I think he struggled a little bit, just new tracks and new team, and
He's a
all that can
19-year-old
happen.
kid, pretty far from home.
Exactly, yeah. And then me, I'm like, I've been around the world 100 times. It's just another racetrack for me.
No kidding. Like, do you remember anything about Grunthal? Like that racetrack at all?
Yeah,
What do you remember?
yeah. So Grunthal, it was wet that because JSR rode
It,
that day, right?
yeah, it rained that morning. Yeah.
Yeah. And Lamastus on his 9,000 cc Husaberg,
Yes, that's right.
yeah, or Vor or whatever that thing was.
Yeah, he
No,
was
I
on a
remember
Husaberg.
that day very well because everyone, I think JSR, that might have been the first one he showed up at, but anyway, I just remember the track was pretty rutted,
Mhm.
and they had to cut that little pond section out of the back because it was just. I liked it because I had it figured out. And I remember they cut it out for the motos. I was kind of bummed, but I just remember it got a good start. And then Lamastus, because there were some long straightaways, he would go by me like 10 miles an hour faster down these long straightaways. I'm like, holy cow. I never thought like the horsepower of a bike was going to make any difference on a motocross track, but he missed a good line and I'd pass him back. And then, we kind of went at it, but that battle pushed us away from JSR. So by the time Lamastus sort of, expired just physically, I
Mhm.
had a pretty good lead and that I just protected to the end. And then second moto, kind of same thing, but I think Lamastus maybe went off the track or something. And JSR was fairly close. And I remember, I just want to beat him. This is who everyone tells me would kick my ass if he was riding, you
Yeah.
just wait kind of thing. And I mean, we went around there for 30 minutes plus 2 laps, about, 20 bike lengths apart. And I beat him to the finish. And that was quite a good day for me, just because, he was probably 10 years younger than I was and riding all the AMA nationals, so I mean, he by all rights should have beat me, but I'm just stubborn enough that I wasn't going to let it happen.
Hey, sometimes stubbornness can be a strength, my friend.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, that race is. I think it's on YouTube. I don't have it on
Oh, I
this.
should go find it.
Yeah, I'll
But,
send you the link.
yeah, send me the
Uh,
links. I'd like to watch Lamassus go flying by me and then
oh
miss
yeah,
the turn and be out in the infield and then do it again.
actually, like watching that race was a reason why I ended up having him on not this show, but on the Big MX Radio podcast about a year ago. And yeah, I don't know if he's still riding a little bit, but yeah, he came up and raced. There's the battle of the four strokes. You guys always got good starts.
Yeah. Yeah, that was another component. I mean, they'd been out for 3 years.
Mhm.
Doug Henry was winning races. He'd already
Yeah,
won a championship in '98. Just and not a single soul raced one in Canada. Every once in a while on a Saturday, they get big entries. So,
yeah.
on the Saturday qualifiers, there'd be some guy would
Kim Hood
even
raced it one
qualify.
this year. Yeah,
What's that?
Kim Hood. There's a like Kim Hood. He's like a local vet guy that was around for. He's actually the 1979 125 Canadian national champion.
Oh,
He
okay.
raced a four stroke this particular year, but I don't know if he raced the national.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cause I just remember there was just random guys here or there. I would see him on a
Mm,
four stroke, it would stand out obviously because
yeah.
I was the only other guy.
Yep.
And so, yeah, I would just notice him here or there, but nobody, with any real, chance to win was on one. But,
Huh.
yeah, it was interesting.
Any bike issues with these things over that particular year, or like worry about parts or nothing?
Nothing. And that's the funny thing. Dave Gallen was freaking out because, whoever Hagseth and
Yep.
Jay Whipple were on YZ250s and they're putting pistons and clutches and everything. All we would do on my bike is just put an air filter in it. And
Oof.
Dave's like, don't we got to put a piston in it? Don't you need a clutch? Don't you? And I'm like, no, these things are just, if you ride them
Tractors.
properly, you don't chew stuff up. And we rode all 9 rounds, same piston, same clutch. I think we might have put 2 tires on. I'm like, certain tracks, I'm, oh no, it's too grippy here. I don't want a new tire. Leave my old one on there. And I was just,
Uh,
kind of an overzealous test rider. I was very picky about things, so I would do stupid stuff like that. Leave an old tire on because
yeah.
I would find some advantage to do so.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, you definitely demoralized the Canadians. And like I said, I knew not to pick a lot of photos for this thing because I knew we could probably just like
Go on for
go
days.
on for days without any photos. I like the fact that
Uh,
I'm going straight to 1989 here.
yep.
All three bikes have different fonts on the numbers. I don't know why, but and
Well,
that's gonna bug me now.
no,
Um,
no, I've got a good answer for you
okay,
because
perfect.
I do. So the photo on the right is from Supercross,
Okay,
and Keith Bowen, his mechanic, who's funny, Ron Heben, nicknamed Slicer.
yeah,
So it's just I had Alan Olson, who was my mechanic in Canada that year.
okay,
So Alan, 79 years old, still plays golf 3, 4 times a week. Well, today he was playing with Slicer.
of course.
So I know, small world. But so I took Alan. I take Alan to lunch about twice a month just to pay him back for all he's done for me over the years. But so at that time, Keith Bowen had that big font number 9 on his bike. You remember that?
That's right. Yeah,
So my mechanic at that time, Steve Butler, who is now the head of testing at Yamaha, and I remind him often that I got him his job there.
of
But
course, as you should.
so he cut out some pretty slick looking numbers there, and we're like, yeah, those are sweet. And the freaking AMA told us we couldn't run them. So
You
it's
couldn't.
like,
You weren't allowed to run this number 16.
yeah, the one on the right as I'm looking at it.
Oh,
So
that's a
the
sweet look.
yeah, so the one on the left was the very first photos on that bike, and I can't I don't know if those were 100% or not, but um, so those were just photo day, early, probably one of the
Right.
first times I
I
was
can
on
tell
that.
that because that's the same that's the same helmet as the one in the middle, and there's no stickers across the visor.
Yep, yep. So
Okay.
that and so that was, yeah, photo shoot day for our little poster. That's where that one came from, the one on the left.
Okay.
And then we went to those slick ones in Supercross, and then they shot us down. So then we ended up going back to like 100%. Back when they were a sticker number company and not a goggle company. But
Hmm.
so that's why you've got all these different looks, and I like that. I remember a whole shot at LA Coliseum. There's such a cool photo of me coming towards the camera, and that just stands out. All of us are kind of some are in the air and some are on the ground, but it just stands out, that big number 16. And then, yeah, no, you can't run that.
Oh yeah, they axed that.
Yeah, because
But
they
yeah,
pulled out some rule and said, oh, it has to be, can't be any taller than this, and it's got to be, it's got to be this far from the top of the front fender, all this stupid stuff. And I'm like, okay, whatever.
well, I know for the longest time they still had the AMA rule that the front number plate had to be flat, and that was why Carmichael ran that flat, big square or number plate on his Honda for the longest time, even though that's not what came on stock.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some strange rules. Well, my trip to Carlsbad in 82,
Uh-huh.
I drive all the way down there. It's like an hour from my house, go to Tech, and they tell me the bottom of your number is too high from the top of your fender. Because remember how for a while they were running them almost wrapping around the crossbar and you couldn't
Right.
read them? So
Yeah.
they made some rule, and mine was not even, it was just, you know, whatever I had bought at the local cycle store and put numbers on it. And they're like,
Right.
nope. I had to drive all the way back home.
Oh,
And I think I stopped at another store, and then I had the goofiest just stick on numbers. I had kind of a cool one. And
yeah,
then I had to put all this goofy stuff to meet their rules. So yeah, I
of
don't know.
course.
It's always something.
Never change AMA. The picture on the far left here, no over the jersey chest protector. Is that just for photo day, or were
Yeah,
you?
that was just, I think I was out just almost in the parking lot, or, oh no, that one, we were just out in the hills.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say
I
this
remember.
is just a hills ride here for
Yeah,
sure.
that's just, we just made a little berm and just, yeah, I don't even think we rode a track that day. I
And
think that was a
this must have
fairly
been the
stock
first
bike.
year for right side up forks on this bike, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, yes, because 88 had conventional, 89 had the upside down fork. Yeah.
How was that?
It was good. I was involved in that whole process because I started in kind of early 86 with Yamaha testing. And I remember it wasn't too long after that we started playing with the upside down fork. I know, gosh, who rode it? Somebody rode it in Japan in the off season Tokyo Supercross.
Mhm.
And I stayed on the conventional fork, but it was Brock, Mickey Diamond, somebody rode the upside down in that race. That was one of the first times anyone had ridden it, but
Mhm.
it's a little harsher. It took a while to get the bushings right and all the tolerance to get comfort back into it, but it definitely was a whole lot better stability, steering, turn in any kind of rutted corner. It was just light years better. So
Okay.
yeah, we just kind of put up with the discomfort, the harshness, especially first touch jump landing. I remember that was something that was hard to get over because the old fork, when it flexed, it wasn't flexing in the point of contact where the bushings, top and bottom bushings would be affected. That thing, when it flexed right at the bushing. So you're trying to, suck a crooked spaghetti noodle up a straw. And it was,
Oh
yeah,
my.
it took a while to get all those rigidities and bushing tolerance and just yeah get it all right. And then back then is when the factory stuff was so much better because you could build it with higher quality material and tighter tolerances and all that. So nowadays production stuff is so good. Just some of the coatings and things, and again some of the tolerance and whatnot still better. But yeah, the production fork of these days are so much better than the difference from standard to works back then.
Certainly. And even at this point, there was still a little bit of back and forth with some people who even thought that the conventional fork was still a better solution. In fact, Suzuki went back to that in
Larry
1995.
Ward, Larry
Larry Ward
Ward.
loved that thing.
Oh yeah, he would. I think he slept with a set of those things at night in bed with him. Yeah, he loved those, and it's just part of the growth of the bike and the just bringing it, because not every new thing is better.
No,
It's
that's true.
like, and you know there was certainly some benefits to the conventional fork, comfort being one of them. And I think Larry just didn't care that much about the stability and the sharpness and the precision of the steering as much as the comfort on his hands. And so it was easy for him to go, and whomever was managing the testing department and whatnot, so everybody kind of gets going down a certain road. And that was bold in my opinion to go back to a conventional, especially hindsight because it only lasted 2 years or something. They were back on an upside down, but
Right.
whatever, hats off to them because that's not easy to do in the world of product development. And because suppliers, and yeah, it's just that's not easy to switch back and forth like that.
Certainly. Now, you're before we get to then my next question for you, were you not one of the early adopters of the full faced helmet or like the chin bar helmet? I don't remember seeing a lot of photos of you in an open face.
I was, because I right around then as I um started riding for Shoei.
Yeah.
And so like Wardy still had the open face for a long time. And like the Arai guys had just that little, four plastic screws holding on a little, it wasn't much more than the old Malcolm Smith piece that we all bolted on. But yeah,
Yeah.
I
My
kind
dad's
of
got a fin
always,
fighter.
yeah,
The
I
fin
always
fighter was
had one of
cool.
Yeah, I always had one of those on my open face helmet,
Yeah.
so I was always kind of in that direction. So it
Mhm.
was right around then when I signed with Shoei that they'd come out with their first legit full face helmet, and I was one of the first guys to race in it. And yeah, so yeah, I think it was, when I started becoming a more photographed rider, like you say, only the front guys get all the attention, and yeah, I was already in the full face by then.
I do happen to also love that if you look at Scott Goggles lineup today, I think they have both of these goggle straps available as like throwbacks, but
Uh-huh.
this is brand new stuff, my friend.
I was just ahead of my time,
Yeah, you're a living throwback. I love it.
that's right.
And
40 years ahead.
yeah, the Acherbys on the fork guards, the first year of the fork guards, and who is in charge of doing the back fender the way you did? I like that. The NGK spark plug sticker is
Oh,
about as
that thing
much a
was
calling.
synonymous. I
Yeah,
mean,
it's a
you were a
calling card.
factory guy if you had
You
that NGK and
gotta
the
have it.
AFAM sprocket one next to it. It didn't matter what your bike looked like if you had those two stickers next to each other.
Absolutely.
But
No, yeah,
we never had all that full pre-printed stuff, so it was kind of up to the guys. But and I'm not sure how they all arrived at what order and whatnot. But yeah, our bikes were some of the best looking bikes back then, in my opinion. The Cowies got really cool when they were going, right around in there,
yeah.
late 80s, early 90s, just with, Chicken and Wardy and those guys, more Chicken, but, they had the cool Fox gear and yeah, but, Bradshaw had the same gear and, so yeah, those were, as we see now with all these retro, Yamaha did it and then Kawasaki followed suit almost immediately. And I'm sure it was already in the planning, but it's just cool to see both of those take that chunk of time, that, early 90s look. Cause yeah, I think you can ask anybody that was a very cool time vividly in the sport.
Absolutely. Optically, I think it's sort of where motocross sort of like kind of hit its stride as far as just like the cameras had gotten advanced to the point where they could actually take some really like good movement a fast motion photo, the colors, the just the style of everything. Honestly, like this Yamaha for lack of like this is basically the same body work minus like some different angles than the body work that you find on a modern two stroke. Like it's
Yeah.
rad shrouds, like separate number plates, fenders, and the whole nine yards. Like this
Yeah.
is basically what it is, right? So
That kind of the beginning of this, what's still somewhat the modern day. Yeah,
yeah,
I
I love
agree.
it. Um, before we get to some photos of the YZM, you won one Supercross.
Correct.
I need that story right now.
Right now.
Right now. It's
So,
always on tap. I
yeah.
guarantee you get asked that like probably more than anything
Yeah, I do
else.
get asked that a fair amount, and
Fair bit.
it's fine because it was an amazing 24-hour period. Really,
Yes, sir.
you know, I had been hurt at San Diego in like round three, so I missed. It's funny because I was paying. Not too many people realize that I was a privateer that year.
Yeah.
I looked like a factory guy, but if you got the official Yamaha uh, press, folder with, it was only Emig and Bradshaw. But I was on a full factory bike, driving a box van, all that. But they gave me a chunk of money, and it was my budget. Well, I sent Randy Lawrence, who was my mechanic then, back east. I'm like, this will only be a little bit. I'm going to get a scope, and I'll be on my way. You know, 10 weeks later, when it finally came back around, I was able to ride, and I rode Oklahoma. That was my first ride back,
Mhm.
and I got 10th. Pretty sure Wardy won. That was his last Supercross win.
Right.
Uh, and then San Jose the next week, I was just hungry. I knew I wanted that factory ride back, and I had such good results, in the early season, and it was just really like a pivotal point for me. And not that you can just turn it up automatically, but things just went well. I had figured out the Supercross or the whoop section leading up to the finish really well, and just so many other little details throughout the day that I won't bore you with. But like going into the night, I was just confident. And a little side note: Keith McCarty, my team manager then,
Mhm.
he came into my box van and he goes, "If you can hit those whoops that good all night, you're going to make a lot of money. And it was just an interesting choice of words because I was like on double contingency from O'Neill, from Yamaha, since I wasn't getting a salary, I had a lot of bonus money. And so
Did he say it like that, or did he say it, if you get through those whoops, you're gonna make a lot of money? Or did he say
that's exactly how it sounded. Yeah, I wasn't going to go into the Keith McCarty, kind of kick the head sideways, but no, that's exactly how it sounded. Um, so it's funny. I crashed in my heat race, so I didn't even go straight to the main. Battled with Larry Brooks like it was, for $1 million in the semi,
Armageddon?
and beat him in the semi, and then the main event, I didn't even get the whole shot. Man, I was the whole shot king there in Supercross for gosh, a few years.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think I came around the first turn sixth or seventh. And so there's a few little milestones that night. One is because people, oh, two guys fell down. That's why you want, all that has been said, but I don't care. But I passed Stanton on the first lap and I led him for 20 laps. So that was a big,
six time
for me, feather in my cap.
Yeah.
6 time. But so I just remember kind of thinking that a lot through that race. I'm like, I just want to beat Stanton. I just want to beat Stanton. And that was, my little goal to pull me through. And it was funny. So I passed Larry Ward, Jeff Ward, somebody else to get into third. And then I was putting a little time on Stanton, and I could just see Chicken and Cooper. And I kept thinking in my head, one of them's going to go down. There's no way, because I was not far away when all that went down in Oklahoma the week before.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I know, Coop's not going for retaliation. He just wants to win a race.
Yeah,
but
because he hadn't won one and wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, that guy got what was some crazy number of seconds, like 13 seconds or some outrageous number, and never won, which is, I feel bad. I should give him mine. But so I'm thinking, okay, this is great. Because I'd been on the podium before, but I'd never had a second. And I'm like, okay. So I'm just watching and going along. I was hitting this one triple, and I could see them in the bull turn, after the triple, just spotting them lap after lap. And I kept Stanton far enough. He's not putting a wheel in. I'm like, okay. We're winding down. Something's got to happen. So then I come over the finish line to get the white flag, and I see yellow flags. I'm like, okay, there it was. And so I didn't know they were both down. So I went around and, a couple more obstacles before I hit that same triple. And I hit that triple, and I'm like, oh,
where is
shit.
Everyone?
I'm like, I'm freaking leading this race. And a good thing I only had 3/4 of a lap to go, because I was pretty much, crapping my pants, because I'm like, oh, that was a little more than I was ready to deal with. I would have been all happy getting second. And all of a sudden I'm like, and then like 2 straightaways later, I knew Stanton's engine. I could just tell Stanton. And I also knew Damon's engine. So, Damon, if you ever watch that race, Damon just runs Stanton almost. Wasn't able to go under the under. Damon had run him so far off the track. Well, now I hear Damon's engine, and I'm like, oh, dear God. I got like 2 straightaways to go.
Yeah.
Please. And that was my worst time through those whoops leading up to the finish.
Of course.
Probably because I was freaking didn't take a breath from the time I went under the under for those next 2 straightaways. But yeah, I mean, what a great night. It's funny that Damon, I think, was happier for me than I even, because you're a little bit in shock. You're like, it doesn't really sink in for a day or two. And Damon's on the phone. We go to Denny's, and Damon's screaming. It's got to be, 3 a.m. for, Marcia and Randy, his parents, back in North Carolina, and he's screaming in the phone, Doug won, Doug won. Yeah, he was like, so those things are the things that stand out. Yeah, great, you won a race. And, I was going to send you a picture of the podium. It's a little friend shot it. It was, we're all wet in champagne, but I didn't. But
the next one, we can do that one too.
Yeah, there you go. But there's just so many little pieces. My mom came, which she rarely came to, many races, and so there's just a lot of little neat parts to that night that, what can you say? It may have only been one, but it's still the record books show that, not very many people have done that. So it was yeah, a great night for sure.
Yeah, like one of many who like they did actually get one. Like guys like Tim Ferry never won one. Guy
Yeah,
Cooper never won one. Like
yeah,
there's a long list of guys who came really close and didn't get one. And you can argue all day of like, oh, so and so crashed out or this guy going down. Like had Ricky Carmichael not thrown in the towel in 2007, we wouldn't be calling Grant Langston a 450 national championship,
yeah,
likely.
yeah,
But
yeah. I mean, you can, yeah,
but
you
he
can
did.
spin
So
those.
yeah, it's just the way it goes.
Yeah, as they say, you got to be in it to win it.
That's right.
So I mean, that's the way the cookie crumbles. That's why we line up week after week, and it's the first guy to get to that flag.
That's right. So you said you off air. I don't know if we talked about it off air or if it was more when we were still talking about it, but or I guess we talked about it with you when we were talking about your son there.
Hmm.
You passed on the opportunity to ride this bike in your prime when you were a competitive racer. But it sounds like you've actually gotten a chance to ride this thing more than once. Tell me a little bit about the YZM. What's so special about this bike? To me, it's about as exotic as it gets for that time period. It's an absolute
Yeah,
specimen.
well, and that's really the thing. That's what makes it so special. And I'm not sure if we were on the air or not, but we were talking about I went to a French international race.
Hmm.
Jackie Vermont was there, and knew him a little bit. I knew his mechanic better, Jim Castillo. We were all blah 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 buddying around, and after the race, his mechanic offered for me to ride it, and I didn't. Yeah, I didn't want to be that guy, and so I thought to myself, yeah, I'm a Yamaha testing guy. I'll ride it, which the opportunity never came because it was designated Europe only.
Hmm.
I don't even think they raced it in Japan. I think maybe one or two rounds, but there was really no 500 class competitive championship in Japan at that time. So it only got raced in Europe. So it was just, talk about a piece of art. There was no aluminum frames back then. There was no water cooled 500 Yamaha engine back then, power valve. It was pure exotic,
One of a kind.
aluminum airbox. It was just like, yeah, I mean, it was amazing. And so, the way it all how I've been told is those things all just kind of dissolved, they crushed or whatever, but they kind of ended up in various places. And this guy bought what he says is about one and a half. So he's got a complete bike. I think he's got a frame and a motor, maybe no swing arm and no, fuel tank, or it's kind of missing. The second one's missing a bunch of stuff, but he paid an awful lot of money,
Yeah.
and I'm surprised he lets it get raced. The very first time, the time I told you my son, I forced him to go up and down the grass field once.
Right.
Like the race was more of a show,
Hmm.
but they asked me if I wanted to race. I'm like, yeah, sure. And so I did gate drop and I rode the crap out of that thing. I won the moto barely. I battled with some other guy on a Honda 500, but I couldn't believe that guy was let me do that. Since then, he's kind of pulled it back and we just do a show. It's 15
Okay.
minutes. We go out with, a handful, you name it. Mickey Diamond goes often. Um, you know, Brad Lackey's been, and, just the list goes on of European guys that are often there. And we just go out and kind of have a fun ride around, kind of mix it up. But
Yeah.
still, I'm so nervous riding the thing. Like I don't want to tip it over in a rut and rip a radiator off it, or
Oh my. Yeah.
do something whiskey throttle and rip the subframe. I mean, it's like, yeah, it's like almost nerve wracking getting on it and riding it.
How is it to start this thing? Because that is not a long Kickstarter for a 500 deuce stroke.
It's not that bad.
Okay.
I've got some, 60-year-old knees. So for me, I just
Mm.
put a stand next to me. I
Hmm.
think what most people do on any 500, to be honest. But
Yeah.
yeah, you just go, as long as you get it right, just get it right past compression, lift again and kick through, it fires right up. So he usually started it, the guy that owns it. But, I've had to do it down on the start line and stuff. So it's not too bad. But yeah, it does look, I think it's just a 250 Kickstarter is what it is. Because I don't
Yeah.
think it
No.
can be much longer because the pipe's right there.
Exactly. No, it's not like the Kawasaki where the Kawasaki has such a unique pipe that sort of like snakes around that allows for a pretty. Actually, it's almost like the what would then become the four stroke style of a Kickstarter that is
Yeah.
sort of long and and windy. But this thing's super neat. Uh disc brakes front and back. There's a bunch of aluminum like obviously the aluminum air box, but like even the
Little
aluminum cover
frame
for
guards and
yeah, frame
yeah,
guards and stuff like that. And
yeah, it's
like how
aluminum
does it
tank.
ride? How does it ride?
Well, it's funny. The very first time, the jetting wasn't quite right, and Jean-Michel Bale's brother, Christian Bale, was there, and it was actually the first time I really spent any time talking to him, and he was super
The
helpful. He
actor?
helped me jet it. What's that?
The actor Christian Bale? Different guy.
Not quite, not
Yeah.
quite. But he helped me, and by the end of the weekend, we got it running pretty good. And then we had a rear brake, failure here or there. I think on one of the other years, so we slowly, but now it runs pretty good. It's jetted pretty good. I think we got the right fork springs in it, so now it's actually nice to ride. You know,
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you could throw your leg over a late 90s or mid 90s KX 500, and that's a better bike. I hate to say
Yeah.
it, but
Yeah. I
it's
actually have had the
that's a
pleasure of
good
riding one of
bike.
those. They're so good. Like a buddy of
They
mine
are
has a
very good.
93 KX and like it's smooth, it handles great. Like obviously it's a little heavier than your regular two-stroke, but those are good
Hmm.
bikes. Those things were like damn near cheating.
Yeah, no, those things are great. I've raced those at that Farley Castle event a handful of times, and man, I forgot how good they were. I did some little magazine stuff way back in the day on those, but man, you get someone that gets the suspension right and doesn't screw the motor up, and some guys will add a little weight to the crank, and man, I rode a really good one a few years back at Farley Castle, and it was just a pleasure to ride. So now, like this engine, I think it's got potential, but yeah, the way these things get put back together, you don't know. Did he get the compression right? Does he have
Mhm.
the right setting on the power valve? You just don't know because it lays down a little more than I'd like it to.
Okay.
It just doesn't want to rev, but it's torquey, it's good, and it's just nice. Being a guy that's ridden the 490 and WR 500 with the fins rattling, and I mean it feels like a good bike, like a water cooled 500 should. So that's nice, but yeah, unfortunately they didn't get a lot of time to develop it. The thing
Yeah.
was, one and done, really. I think they raced it 2 years and then they pulled the program because, the the 500 two-stroke sales were sliding. And yeah, I mean, what was the last year? 94 was the last
94.
year. Yeah.
Mike LaRocco still the reigning 250 or 500 national champion
Yeah. Yeah. I reminded him
continuously.
that he came to Fox Hills is where kind of that big race has been relocated, and
Okay.
LaRocco came this year, and I
He did
reminded
he?
him.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And
It's
I
good to get him
reminded
out of the
him because
woodwork.
he's still the current and reigning 500 national champ.
Yeah, as he
He
should.
just rolled his eyes. He looked at me like, how many times I've heard that.
Yeah, no kidding.
But
That's old.
yeah, no, it's
That's
good. It's good to see Mike. I mean, we were teammates there for a lot of years, and then I think he hated
mhm,
me,
nice.
here or there, like he probably hated everyone. But no, it was good to see him. Yeah.
No, I don't know if there's anyone who's ever hated more people in motocross or around motocross more than Mike LaRocco, and that includes your other teammate there, the Beast of the East. Like, I think Damon gets a bit of a bad rap on that thing. I don't think he's literally. It wasn't anywhere near as sour as Mike.
Yeah. Yeah. But I think Damon, he didn't know how to handle himself in a lot of situations, and that was his default.
Mm.
I'll just sit there with the grumpy look on my face, and then people will leave me alone.
It works.
Yeah, I mean, there's no better way to keep people away from you than look like you're gonna punch them square in the throat.
I actually the first thing that just came to my mind is have you ever had a bad interaction with a fan?
Not really.
Is there like a single
You get
time where like
guys.
someone rubbed you wrong or like
Nah,
uh
I was pretty. I mean, early on. I understood that those are the guys that are effectively paying your salary.
uh-huh.
They're writing the checks for the bikes and the helmet and the gear. Yeah, and so I was always pretty tolerant. But every once in a while, you just get some obnoxious guy that won't take no for an answer when he wants a jersey, and you're like, you just watched me hand my jersey to somebody else. Now you want another one?
Yeah.
And it's like, sorry, you try and be as nice as can be, and then he starts badgering you, and I would just walk away.
Huh.
But yeah, there's some guys out there that are just Yeah, they're insufferable.
I love it, man. Well, this bike is pretty awesome. I think we're gonna have to talk about it. It's somewhere down the line as well. There's got to be some more photos of this thing that we can take a look
There's some
at
good
too.
stuff. So you notice that picture of me and my 59.5-year-old whip there?
I see that. That's the
So I
same as
sent
my
that to my
35-year
son.
old whip.
I sent that to my son, and he answered back. I should have sent you that one as well. He was riding at Paris that day, not France, Paris
Uh-huh.
Raceway in California.
I love that
And
track.
he's got this photo of him just, I mean, I swear it was upside down. He had it so whipped.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Yeah.
thanks. You can't let me
Like
just,
like father like
because
son.
yeah, I'm like, that was like my wife took that video and I just did a little screenshot of the video because that was about as far as I got it over.
Hmm.
And he had his freaking upside down. I'm like, thanks. He just always
Yeah.
got to kick me right in the teeth.
No kidding. Nothing like your kid to make you feel a little bit more loved. Last one I
Right.
have for you, and I told you we'd go over, is
Right.
this RM Dubach, love it. Scott goggles. Was Bevo hooking it up even back then or what?
Bevo didn't even know I existed then, but it wasn't too
Amazing.
long. It
This
wasn't
is
too
this
long
is
because
is that a Bell Magnum or a
yeah,
I think it might.
yeah.
I
And
think
of
it's a Bell
course,
Magnum.
it looked like a like a salad bowl on my head because I don't
Uh-huh.
know if I didn't get the right size or that's how they fit. But yeah, that was you see all my sponsors. It's like nothing.
Yeah.
I
No,
think I
it's a
bought
like no, not even an NGK spark plug sticker.
no, I couldn't afford those. But yeah, that was I think I got that jersey from Mitch at Pro Circuit. If you look at the front, that was the old classic Pro Circuit jersey.
Okay.
But yeah, I was CMC number 5. That was the end of 83. So that was in 84 at Saddleback Park. And yeah, I was probably just racing some local race, trying to make 35 bucks and living the dream.
Yeah.
But that's Webco Hill. Anyone that knows Saddleback knows that
Okay.
section of the track. And you see those levels in the back. Those
Uh-huh.
were the famous big levels that we all jumped at the 84 National, probably 6 or 8 months later.
No way. That is super cool. And so like you would have put on this is a 125. This first of
Yeah,
all, this is a good bike. This is a really
yeah.
good bike. And
Especially when you had Paul Theed, of
yeah,
modern day race tech, when
of
he
course. Yeah.
when he was back, ST Racing, Sands and Theed. Not too many people remember him, but he had those because Gary Denton, which is a name from the past, was racing those bikes, and Paul had them figured out. So yeah, that was a good running bike.
No kidding. Yeah. Like so how old are you here?
So
You're
that is 83. So I'm almost 20. Yeah, that's the end of 83. So I'm already 20. Yeah, I'm 20
oh
years old
wow.
there because I turned 21 my rookie year, which was 84, where I rode all the whole nationals. I turned 21 in Binghamton, New York. And yeah, we had a few beers that night.
There you go. No kidding.
Yeah, so I
Well,
was 20.
that is super cool, man. Like it's actually kind of crazy to think that I am right now 15 years older than you are in this photo. But yeah, and to think that the first race I ever went to, I was like 9 or 10, and then you were there winning it. So it's kind of cool to see all these things kind of come full circle, man.
Yeah, no, that's cool. I mean, these old photos are they're just great, because it brings you back to not just that moment of that day, but that era, kind of all the stuff you were doing, what vehicle you had and where did you practice and who was your rivals. And yeah, so just that photo can spawn a million memories.
Do you recall the first time, or do you recall like the sort of like the time in your life when you could officially say, I make a living from doing this?
It was
Like, did you
probably
have a job
around
prior?
that number 16, those three
Okay.
photos you popped up.
Yep.
So right then, because that was my first year, 89, right? I had a Yamaha contract where I was getting a salary.
Okay.
I was getting all expenses paid. I was making helmet money. I was making gear money. Even
Mm.
I think Bevo threw a couple dollars goggle money my way. So I think right around that time was when I finally, because you just chase and you chase and you chase. You're just grinding and grinding and grinding and trying to be better each. You just you don't really have this line in the sand that you finally crossed over. You just kind of arrive. And I remember being going to press day at Anaheim. Kind of our first race in '89, and I'm right there. And I could go way off on a whole nother tangent of, imposter syndrome and not thinking you belong there. Cause how did I get here? I was just a schmuck. I looked up to all these guys, and that was probably one of the things that limited me to whatever extent throughout my career is I always, oh, that's so-and-so. He is, and then whatever you put in your brain, what
Yeah.
he is, that immediately just made it that, well, it's okay if he beats me and it's okay. So it took me
Yeah.
a long time reading a lot of, professional athlete books and, self-help books and just a lot of stuff to finally sort of break through that and yeah, sit there at the gate going, hey, you know what? I think I can win tonight. I can, then you would set, better, more lofty goals and not, kind of sit there and count yourself into fifth before the gate ever dropped because you got Stanton on one side, and you got Wardy on the other side, you got Bale two down, and Bradshaw over there, and freaking Kadrowski and LaRocco. It's like it's pretty easy to kind of sell yourself back into whatever spot. So it took me a while to get, I guess comfortable in my own skin at that moment in life, and it's
Hmm.
not easy. Some people do it very well, others don't. So it was work for me to get comfortable in those environments.
Yeah, certainly. I can certainly like relate to that. Like I find myself like a lot of times, like even talking to a guy like yourself, like I'm just a bricklayer. Like in my own head, I'm a bricklayer. Like I'm the son of a bricklayer. I had went to bricklaying school when I was 17 years old, graduated when I was 20. I was a mid-pack B rider that just has a mind to remember these types of things, like whether it be facts, stats, results, whatever it happens to be. Because honestly, there's one of the things I hooked up a couple of kids locally with Fox deals tonight. Um, and the one of the moms thanked me. So I was like, yeah, like when I was that kid's age, I could only ever dream of having the results that would garner me a deal like that, or so I guess like my ability to sort of get to where I'm at now is sort of it's always a sobering thing when a guy like Doug Dubach will take my phone call. Like Doug, I put you up there with the rest of the superstars of the sport, and it was a star I could never reach for, and that's what we're
Yeah.
doing today. So
Yeah.
it's
Well, no,
pretty
it's
cool.
great. But I mean, look, you got to recognize some of the great things that you've been able to do, doors that have been open for you. I
Yeah.
don't know your history. I don't know anything, but just, to be walking, up the hill at Ernay
Yes,
and,
sir.
attend an event like that and just, soak all that in, that's pretty special. I mean, I know there was you know, roughly over 100,000 over the 3 days that did the same thing, but, not in the same capacity. We're all standing in the,
On
the
the other
media
side of the
tent.
hill.
And yeah, just, that experience is great. I went in 2015. I took my
Okay.
son, who was, gosh, what would he have been there? 12 years old or something.
Yeah.
I did some other event and we just, hey, let's stay and go. Might have been on the YZM 500 for all I know, but,
I think that
you
does
know,
line up.
um, but it was just such a cool day back then. We were full spectators,
Yeah.
just, got chainsaws blasting your eardrums out for 2 days straight. But it was neat to be there again and just to see, what this sport means to, the racing public. And it's neat. I was quite an event to attend.
Certainly, like Motocross Nations has always been a really special one to me. The first one I went to, I was able to be at was last year. And then as soon as I found out it was in Ernay, I'm like, I got to go to that race. And like with my connection through Verb Moto, they make getting a press credential very simple. Like basically when you're rolling with Verb, it's just an application, and they give you the green light. But yeah, there's more than a few times where I kind of took a moment just to sort of like I'm one of maybe I think there was like 100 of us that like were allowed to be on the inside of the track, filming and taking photos. And yeah, I got to be one of those people. So
Yeah, yeah,
I
no,
might
that's
just be a
great.
bricklayer, but I get to do some cool things sometimes.
Yep. See, that's a I never had any divine plan when I was a kid, but I stumbled, fumbled, and worked my tail off to be able to do a lot of cool stuff. So yeah, it's yeah, the motorcycles have treated me pretty well.
No doubt, man. Well, we're definitely gonna have to do a part two, three, and possibly four down the road. I was right. We did, and like I don't know how this will end up edited down, but it'll be about an hour and a half. That was intended to be about 35 minutes.
Close
But
enough.
yeah, close enough. I think that's about as close as we were gonna get. But Doug, this was so much fun. I really appreciate you making the time for the show. I hope that you'll want to do it again sometime. And yeah, this was great.
Nope, yeah, just hit me up and I'll try and dig around and find some of those photos that I couldn't seem to find when I was looking a few days ago. So yeah, we'll get back together and we'll have another good night.
Awesome, man. Well, don't hang up just yet on the podcast, but for right now, we'll cut things off.
Okay, perfect.